All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Main Street Management 101. My name is Kristen Lopez. I am the Senior Director of Programs here at Connecticut Main Street Center. And today's webinar is perfect for someone who is new to Main Street Management or is just looking for a refresher. We'll be going over what exactly is Main Street Management, the qualities of a downtown, and we're going to look at the four-point approach to Main Street Management and get into what that exactly means. But before we do that, just a few words. Connecticut Main Street Center is the expert resource for developing and sustaining vibrant downtowns and main streets that fuel our state's prosperity. It is our mission to assess, educate, and convene around the topics central to creating a thriving downtown so that main streets all around the state can develop, grow, and prosper. We are very grateful to our sponsors and funding partners that make this work possible. Our founding sponsors are Eversource and the State of Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development, and also funding from Webster Bank, Travelers, and Liberty Bank. And with that, let's get into it. So, by virtue of you attending this webinar today, I already know that you know how important main streets are to some degree, right? They are the place where culture, commerce, and community converge. They are historic and cultural anchors. They are economic engines. They are social gathering places. We often refer to the downtown as the living room for everyone, right? Truly, downtowns are the heart and soul of a community, a point of pride, and really an indicator of the overall health of a town. And so I want you to think of your favorite downtown anywhere in the world, okay? And get into the chat, and I want to hear what is your favorite thing about your favorite downtown anywhere in the world? What do you like most about it? Write it in the chat. Walkability, definitely. What else? Art, variety of shops, public spaces, yep, restaurants, activities, walkability, community gathering place, a mix of local and national, a lot of walkability, historic, charming green space. Yeah, so these are all great. For me personally, all these things, and I love shade. I love a walkable downtown, but if you're stuck in the sun, I don't like that as much. So I love shaded streets as well. The story, yes, absolutely. All of these things, are elements to a great thriving downtown. And so we have created these kind of six qualities of a thriving downtown, because sometimes it can be hard to articulate what exactly makes a downtown. We know it's all of these things combined, but where do they all fit? What's that kind of great bigger story of vibrancy? So we're going to go through these six qualities, and as we do that, think of what you just wrote in the chat and where do they line up in these qualities? So first, a commitment to a sustainable future. This is talking about, the shade that I had mentioned, the trees, the green space, things of that nature. Next, we have investment in a diverse economy. So that's, of course, our businesses, but it's also housing and our workforce and all of those things together. Conveniently connected and easy to navigate. So that's talking about our public transit. It's talking about our sidewalks. It's talking about biking. It's talking about always the hot topic of parking, right? How are people getting to your downtown, and once they're there, how are they getting around? A unique sense of place. This is where the art and the charm and the character, the history, the culture of a place really comes to life through events, our marketing, branding, the types of businesses that are there. Welcoming and inclusive to all. So this is looking at the wide range of diversity, age, race, ethnicity, language, ability, family status, family stage, life size, lifestyle. All of these things need to be considered in a vibrant downtown. And you don't need to be everything to everyone, but are you welcoming and inclusive to people to enjoy your downtown? And then, of course, there's a dedicated Main Street entity that is, really has galvanized that public and private commitment to the downtown. And so these are the six qualities that really any thriving downtown has. So, how do we cultivate these qualities? And we do that through the 4 points of Main Street management, which is organization, economic vitality, design, and promotion. And this is the framework in which we do Main Street management. And so, what exactly is this? It's a place based economic development strategy that involves managing and promoting the physical, economic, social, and cultural aspects of a downtown or a main street or village center, commercial corridor, whatever you call your downtown in your community, and make it thriving, vibrant, and accessible place for residents, visitors, and businesses. This framework has been adopted by thousands of communities across the country. Every community and commercial district is different. It has its own distinct assets, its sense of place, its people, its history. But the Main Street approach provides really a practical and adaptable framework for downtown transformation to happen that is really tailored to local conditions. So it's very much these 4 points are a framework. And why do we love it so much? It's because this approach works. Main Street America, in which we are a state coordinating program of, found that last year, for every dollar spent on downtown management, nearly $22 was generated back in new investment. So that's a really powerful return on investment to spend in downtown management, right? So let's get into the 4 points a little bit more and look at them a bit closely. And so, just so that you know, when I say the 4 points, you can really think of them as categories of different activities, projects, or tasks. These 4 points work in concert with each other to achieve the overall vision and goals for a downtown. So let's get started with organization. We're starting here because it's really the bedrock for everything and is really key to kind of unlocking the vibrancy. And so, what do we do with this organization? What are the main activities that we're focused on here? First and foremost, it's about championing a shared vision and developing clear goals to see that vision come to life. And so, what that looks like is community engagement, stakeholder engagement around what do we want to see our downtown become, and creating a strategic plan that is then articulated into goals and then made into an annual work plan. And the Main Street management entity does that work year over year to achieve that vision and those goals. And that is the crux of what, a Main Street management entity does. And in order to do that work, it's critical that they build partnerships and relationships among all different types of stakeholders. We look at municipal government as one obviously key stakeholder, but that includes a lot of different departments like economic development, planning, public works, parks and rec, absolutely public safety. But then we also look on the private side of business owners, property owners, of course, the residents that live in the downtown, and the customers that come, the tourists or the visitors that come to the downtown. All of these different stakeholders can potentially have different agendas, maybe competing agendas at some times. And the role of Main Street management is to be the main convener and a collaborator of all these stakeholders coming together to once again realize that shared vision that everyone has for the downtown. It's really critical component of Main Street management is built on these partnerships. Being the biggest cheerleader for the downtown to get volunteers to be a part of this work that you're doing. A lot of times, and we see across the state here, that if a community is fortunate to have a dedicated Main Street entity, typically only one person's working and is being paid to do this work, and they can't do it all. And so having a strong volunteer kind of force behind you to help you implement all of these things is really important. and to always be banging that drum and that excitement for the downtown, to advocate for new resources, for specific programs that you want to see in the downtown, in terms of maybe streetscape improvements. That is the role of Main Street Management, is to be that biggest cheerleader for the downtown. And of course, we would be remiss not to mention funding, which is a critical piece of what we're focused on here in this organization 4 point. It is securing diverse funding sources, and managing that money effectively, right, to carry out our work plan to reach our goals. A typical myth that we see a lot is that it is all on the municipality to fund a Main Street program, and that's just not true. The municipality should absolutely be supporting in some way, shape, or form the downtown program, but as we just mentioned, all of these stakeholders that are, a part of the downtown fabric, they all have a stake in the success of the downtown as well. And so it's important for the Main Street manager or the entity to really develop that strategic funding plan to, mobilize, anchor institutions or property owners to financially invest in the downtown. I should mention here that we're going to go through this, presentation. Feel free to ask questions along the way, but we'll definitely get into the questions at the end of the presentation. So next is economic vitality. And so this is all about diversifying and strengthening the district's economic base. We talk about this a lot, and we had in our exercise of what are your favorite qualities. Of course, this is a lot about the business makeup of our downtowns, but there's some other things in here as well that we need to take into consideration. With first starting with any of our work that we do in our downtown district, we have to have a strong sense of the current market. And so what do I mean by that? One, it's absolutely understanding who lives in your downtown, who works in your downtown, what are their demographics, what are their psychographics. It's knowing your built environment. So that is knowing what is your building inventory, what is your commercial space inventory, what is the condition of your buildings. Having a real sense of what is going on in your district is really critical, because it informs a strategic plan that is based in reality, that will then influence all of our activities that we do. And as I mentioned, a huge part of this is supporting our businesses. And so how does supporting our business, what does that look like? That could be in incentive programs. That could be in support and education. That could be in promotional activities that drive foot traffic, or running a gift card program. There's a lot of tactics and strategies that we can use to support our local businesses. It could also be as simple as maintaining a direct line of communication and making sure our businesses know when construction is about to happen, or if something new is coming down the road that they need to prepare for. It's keeping them informed, and so that they can make the decisions that they need to make. And then it's also supporting them in workforce needs. Is there a gap in the workforce market that businesses really need help with? Is there something that can be done from a Main Street Management perspective that can help these businesses work with their workforce issues? And then, of course, we're also looking at housing housing density in our downtown districts is really important to the resiliency of our businesses and overall our downtown's health. And I mean, we saw this in action during, COVID lockdown, right? The downtowns that were primarily all office and commercial, withered away, and they are still struggling to come back online. And now we're seeing, offices being converted into residences. Having people in walking distance to your downtown important for the local businesses, because that's where they get a lot of their business from, is, going to those restaurants, walking down, or going to those retail shops, or the laundromat, or what have you, right? That business mix supports that local residential population. And so, what we can do to be advocates of housing density in our downtown district is really important for the health, right, of our businesses downtown. And then it's about filling in the gaps. So whether that's vacancies that we have, but we're being thoughtful about what types of businesses that we want to see filled in those vacancies. So is there a business niche that we want to complement with, a business cluster, if you will? We want to find complementary businesses that work with that type of business cluster. Or is there, a huge demand for a certain type of business and we need it? The Main Street management entity works to fill those gaps in a strategic, thoughtful way. A lot of times, we can think about the Main Street manager's role is very similar to an economic developer's role for the entire town, but the Main Street manager is really focused on just their district. And so they could be courting restaurants to come into the downtown or courting that developer that wants to do a mixed use and working with them to kind of program that space, right? These are all the different types of activities that a Main Street manager can do. Next, let's go to design. And design may be one of the easiest points to understand because it's about all things visual in your downtown. So have a vision, a picture of your downtown in your mind's eye, and everything that you see is what we're talking about here in this design point. And this is all about enhancing the physical and visual appearance of the downtown. So that includes infrastructure, like our roads, like our sidewalks, of course. It is about wayfinding, the signage that we have, our lighting. Not only, do we have well lit, streets and alleyways and parking lots, but does the lighting add character to our downtown? Does it contribute to the sense of place? How are we decorating our light poles? Do we have banners? Do we have hanging flowers, right? We're thinking about all of these details that contribute to the overall appearance of our downtown. It's about our green spaces, our landscaping. How are we creating this welcoming environment for anyone who comes to our downtown? And then tied to that is absolutely about maintaining cleanliness. Is trash picked up regularly? Is graffiti being remediated in a very timely manner? Are the sidewalks being swept clean of, cigarette butts or leaves or snow? These things are the small details that, across the state we see a lot of communities struggle with, especially if public works is understaffed and there's no additional resources for the downtown. And so the Main Street management, entity is really figuring out how to solve these problems so that the overall, appearance, the cleanliness is taken care of. This is about historic preservation. We know that over the years, beautiful historic facades had been covered up to be a more modern look. And now we're taking all of that down and really showing that character, which contributes to the overall look and feel and, personality of a town, right? And it's looking at our businesses themselves. And so, as it kind of ties to economic vitality and how we're supporting our businesses, but the window displays, what is their business signage? How does that, enhance the overall experience? Um, and so, providing whether that's, guidelines or incentive programs that we give them to do signage improvements or facade improvements or even beautifications. We've seen communities do small micro grants for that business to, buy some flowers, buy a bench in front of their store, right, to create that really welcoming environment. And the last bit of the 4 points is promotion. And this is about marketing the district's identity to attract residents, visitors, and even businesses and developers, right? And so ultimately where we start with promotion is that we're crafting a compelling brand identity that is rooted in your downtown district, culture, heritage, ultimately spirit of the place. We want to create a brand identity that is an articulation of what people already feel when they're there. If we try to impose a brand identity that feels disconnected from reality, it's going to feel authentic and we won't really feel that sense of place. And so it's starting with that brand identity. And then we're using events to get people into our downtown. And not all events are created equal. I just want to spend a quick moment here talking about events. Events are a really great way to start getting buzz around the downtown if maybe not a lot has been started yet in the downtown. It's a great way to kind of create a sense of place, especially in some struggling towns where maybe you don't have an anchor business. You can create anchor events. But the thing with events is that there's kind of like two really big, broad categories of events. You have special events that are there more for community goodwill. That's for community members to come out, enjoy the downtown, come together as a community. These are, the festivals and that kind of a thing. And then you have retail events, and retail events are really meant to drive business sales to the businesses on your main street. And a lot of times we hear that businesses hate those community goodwill events, because they detract from their business and all this kind of thing. And that's well and good. But if we're only focused on those community events and not a lot of retail events, you can get kind of a lot of pushback from your businesses. So we want to make sure there's an even balance and messaging around the different types of events that we're doing and why we're doing them. And then we're looking at our marketing. So marketing online, offline, how are we getting the word out about our downtown and getting the types of people that we want to come visit and spend money? And of course, it's the storytelling, right? That guides all of our promotional activities, that highlights our local culture and our assets. As I mentioned, we are of course leveraging, social media, and we're online doing that type of work. But then it's also, offline promotional activities. And how are we working with partnerships? And what are we doing to drive awareness and driving foot traffic? And another quick note here, again, as this ties to, kind of economic vitality and kind of I mentioned all these 4 points really kind of work in concert with each other. A lot of times we can see a Main Street program really focusing on doing all of this work to get people into stores and patron, our businesses downtown. But also a key point of that is working with your local businesses. Local businesses have to market themselves to, survive, to exist. It's, part of being a business owner. You have to market yourself. And so, you can think about how can I help that business market themselves better? And sometimes we see this happening through giving businesses micro grants to put on their own events to drive people in. That could be in providing, again, a micro grant to support their marketing. So there's a lot of ways that we can think about promotion that is not always top down, right? And so those are the 4 points of Main Street management. We have organization, economic vitality, design, and promotion. As I had mentioned earlier, all of these points need to work in concert with each other and be carried out to serve a larger purpose. It's serving a greater vision, a strategic direction, and it's really important that as we're figuring out what activities that we want to do, that we also have a framework to measure the progress and success in carrying out these activities. Because we ultimately want foster vibrancy in our downtown. And that's however you define it for your community. Vibrancy, for a community that, let's say, is really all about, live music and has more of an industrial feel, right? That might look really different Vibrancy might look really different than a community that's really focused on, um, family oriented kind of experiences. And so it's really important for us to create our own measurements of success so that we can make sure that we're being successful in reaching our goals and reaching our vision. And we're seeing that this point, this evaluation of our work is lost frequently in what we see around the state. And so here are just some examples as a launch point to start thinking about this evaluation framework. But again, it will be tailored to your own specific community. And all of these slides will be sent in the webinar recap later. So let's see all of this in action. We're going to look at a case study from Madison, Indiana. They have a population of about 12,000, median household income is about $57,000. And they won the 2024 Great American Main Street Award winner. And I think you'll hear it in the video, they are the oldest Main Street program in the country, I believe. And so let's hear their story and pick up all of the different things that we just discussed and see how they're played out in real life.
Madison Main Street is the oldest running Main Street program in the nation.
We say this is what happens when you have years of people committed to this program.
Not only are we a historic landmark district, but we are the largest contiguous historic landmark district in the entire nation. Historically, Madison was a community full of industry. Once times changed and business was moved, these beautiful buildings were left. Over time, that's when people would see some of this destruction happening. A lot of our preservation can be pointed back to our historic Madison Incorporated. They helped stand up and say we need to preserve these buildings, and that was when the Main Street program really started to launch.
We've now created those partnerships that are bringing historic preservation to a whole new paradigm.
The historic Eagle Cotton Mill was a great example of private and public investment.
For the longest time, you'd pull into Madison and you would see this old cotton mill with white plastic tarps swaying in and out of the windows and buzzards living inside.
But that all started changing just a few years ago with an investor that saw a vision, shared that vision with the city of Madison.
It was amazing to see that old building evolve into this beautiful boutique hotel.
The Madison Main Street program has been around since 1979, and it is such a point of pride. We start all of our Main Street 101s with that we are the home to the first Main Street. It is definitely the example of success, whether it's historic preservation or events, farmers market, just everything that a Main Street could be doing.
We have a designated board member who is the committee chair for each of the 4 points. Organization is like our foundation for the entire program. Design is there to help apply local ordinances, make things look pretty.
Economic vitality, supporting their business owners,
Sustaining our businesses and providing data to them.
promotions, handling a lot of the events, promoting the downtown.
Madison Main Street organizes a number of annual events and workshops. Girls Weekend, Music in the Park, the biennial Loft Tour, and we have Holiday Open House. We actually call it the 5-point approach. We call Farmers Market our 5th approach.
A few years ago, the City of Madison approached the Main Street program and said, hey, would you guys be willing to take over running the farmers market?
The Madison Farmers Market is the longest running in the state of Indiana. It was established in 1809. We're proud to say we've increased vendors, vendor attendance, customers. It's put on by staff and a team of volunteers and vendors.
You can't do it alone. You have to have volunteers on all of these committees.
Now we're seeing a younger generation willing to give their time to help make Madison what they always wished that it could be. Over the last few years, we've seen a lot more people that have left Madison but now returned, and with that has brought a lot more acceptance. The Chandler is owned by Matt and Dan Chandler. They came back to Madison. When they were walking along Main Street, they walked by Village Lights bookstore. And in their window, they had a Pride display up for Pride Month. And they were both just so touched by seeing that, so they knew this was the place they wanted to invest in next. Main Street fits into the community by focusing on the heart of our community. We work with so many different organizations. We have our friends at Visit Madison, City of Madison, Art Alliance, the Chamber.
What we've done just in the past year with Madison Main Street Organization is increase our financial commitment to help strengthen that organization's resources.
Our Economic Vitality Committee has formed a wish list based on data showing needs of our community. We had no toy store here in town. After doing some research, recruitment efforts were made, and it worked out.
Seeing the businesses, the shops owners, the experiences that people are having now, and talking to so many visitors from all over, it's a testament that our planning is working.
Madison still feels like a hidden gem, like it's someplace to be discovered.
And it's one that takes pride in its history, but it's also one that's working for a brighter future.
Madison can start bragging about itself. I'm really excited to see where it takes us next.
Excellent. I love those videos. There are a bunch of those similar videos available on Main Street America's YouTube page if you need a dose of inspiration of what your downtown could become. But I'd love to hear from you in the chat. Anything really stick out to you in that presentation? Anything that got you excited? One of the things that I love about that is, really the whole 4 points in action. The importance of having a dedicated team to manage the downtown. Yeah. I love the fact that they founded an EEA with the toy store, right? They identified the need and then they took their efforts to get a toy store in place. People wanting to maintain the historical context. The farmers market. Yeah. I mean, farmers markets are great because you eat those vegetables or those food products that week, and then you got to come back to restock. So that's a great promotional strategy. Absolutely. Okay, so where do we go from here? Oops. So where do we go from here? How do you get started in establishing a Main Street program? And so here we've identified some general steps that a community could potentially take to get to that goal of having a Main Street management program. So first, we start on building interest in having a managed approach in our downtown. We really need all kind of a handful of key representatives of different stakeholder groups really on board. If we don't have that general consensus that this is the right approach, it's going to be a tough sell and a hard kind of an uphill battle, if you will. Not to say that shouldn't be a deterrent from, kind of getting started in a smaller way, but really having a broad kind of coalition support for a managed approach is a really great way to get started. And then from there, formalizing a steering committee that's going to kind of find this managed approach first home. So that is, where are we going to get initial funding from? What is our vision? What do we want to accomplish with this? The steering committee will continue to do stakeholder engagement, collect data, and from there make an informed decision about what do we want to do next. Do we want to go forward and form a 501c3 right now? Do we want to form a bid? Or right now, we're not ready for that. We're going to turn into a working group. So we're not just going to meet. This working group rolls up its sleeves and does the work. And from there, We create a strategic plan that is guided by a transformational strategy, a really kind of flag in the ground of who we want to be as a downtown, and then creating a work plan to carry out that strategy and all those goals associated with that. And then we work to get it done, and then we're evaluating and keep on doing the work. And these last three steps here are really, we need a roundabout here. These are in perpetuity. This is the role of Main Street management, is continually updating our strategic plan as the market changes, and updating our goals and vision if that's, if that's necessary, and creating that work plan, right, to always stay resilient and relevant to our market solutions or market environment. So if you are interested in establishing a managed approach in your community, please reach out to us. We are very eager for you to help you along this journey. And at Connecticut Main Street Center, over the next year and on, we will be rolling out more and more workshops and things of this nature to really help communities move along this roadmap. And I'll give a quick teaser right now. Next April, we'll actually be hosting a workshop around helping communities start creating their strategic plan. So more to come on that, but stay tuned, and that will be for next April. And if you already are a member, we encourage you to get your annual Main Street Management Assessment if you hadn't already. So the assessment further breaks down all these 4 points into like over 80 concrete action items that you can take. And we look at how you're doing, where your strengths, where your weaknesses, and where should you be focusing your attention on first. Because the one thing that, the Indiana case study example, they are a well-established program with, a board and paid staff and a volunteer program, right? And so they're able to do a lot more because they have the team and capacity. But when we're just starting out, when we're just building up our volunteer structures, when we maybe have a part-time person, we need to make sure that what we're working on will give us the biggest, return for our effort. And so that's where this assessment can help you out with. And so with that, let's open it up for questions. I see already one in the chat here, and we also got a few in advance. So I'm going to get going into these questions and keep them coming. All right, so the first one here. Are there any notable differences between a chamber of commerce and a bid? Why would you pick one over the other? Great question. And yeah, some really distinct differences here. So a chamber of commerce is usually over a town or a region, and they are a membership-based organization. So they get dues from members, and then their members get benefits. A bid is a specific geographic location in which the property owners decide, they vote. It has to go through a vote to tax themselves an additional rate, in which that tax money is then used to be reinvested back into that geographic district here. So very different. And why would you pick one over the other? So just between these two choices, a bid is a great way to go because you get a funding stream in place and you're focused on a specific geographic area of your downtown. However, a bid by itself is not sufficient enough. So bid you can think of as a funding mechanism that will reinvest back into the district. But what do you do with those dollars? We recommend adopting a Main Street management approach. And so that activities are looking around all over economic vitality, design, promotion, organization. And so you really kind of need to blend the funding world of a bid, but with the management approach of the 4 points. Let me know if you'd like any more clarification around that. Okay, some of, let's see here. Okay, who typically runs the program? Yeah, so the program can be run, so the ultimate goal is to have a separate entity that that is running the program. And so this would at least be a one, paid staff person, full-time ideally. That's kind of like the goal. More of a goal would be even part-time staff or additional staff to support that role. But you want a separate entity ultimately to run this program. Coming out of like an economic development department is challenging because that economic development, coordinator, director, et cetera, they are responsible for the whole municipality. So they have to think about everything, and they might not necessarily have the time and the capacity to focus just on their downtown. Additionally, as we just kind of went over all of this work, maybe business recruitment would be, an easier lift for an economic development director, but putting on events, working on a marketing program, those things are extremely time consuming. So it really needs to be its own kind of separate entity. Now, there are also some very successful programs that are volunteer run, and that's Georgetown Village Renaissance. No, GVR, Georgetown Village Restoration. I apologize if I'm getting that wrong. They are a very high performing volunteer run 501c3 doing great work. So there's a couple of different models, but ultimately we want a single person or a dedicated entity to work on these activities. There are some questions that came in ahead of time that I'm going to address now. So one of the questions was, can you discuss transit-oriented development opportunities in our downtown areas? So first of all, if you have not already heard of CMDA, Connecticut Municipal Development Association. I forgot what the A stands for, something like that. I know someone will correct me in the chat here. But that is a new program that is coming online that is going to provide funding for TOD projects in downtown districts. And so that is one thing, if you're not aware of, to become familiar with. But ultimately, we see a lot of kind of, TOD projects, but a little bit more in the silos. And so ultimately, as a Main Street management program or just getting started, you need to understand who is using your transit. How are they using it? Are they using it to leave your downtown? Are they using it to come into downtown and work? What are they doing? And so once you can get into that understanding of how transit is being used in your district, then you can figure out what to actually do with that, how to capitalize on that. Right. And so that's the first step that I would say for, any downtown that does have transit, is figuring out how it's being used and then figuring out how to create those connections to the downtown district. Next question that was pre-sent in was, apply what you know to downtowns that share a border with college campuses. Yeah, so college campuses, this one is a tough one because every single college or university really has its own culture. There are some universities that are just impenetrable. Like it's very hard to develop like an ongoing, meaningful relationship with universities. That's true. And so if that is your situation, I would say my advice is just continue to build those relationships and keep them engaged, because it could take that, new president that comes in, a new dean that comes in that, really, that, changes the tune and they want to be all on board, right? An example kind of that is University of Hartford. University of Hartford actually incubates, if you will, or hosts the Upper Albany Main Street program. and have integrated some curriculum into helping their businesses in that district. So that's one example. Another example is actually just heard about from our State of Maine event where we had Fairfield talk about how Sacred Heart and Fairfield University came in to take over some really chronic vacant storefronts and activate those for their own kind of school use, but also for public benefit as well. And so there are some great models out there. It really depends on, where that university is at and, having the right people at the table. Another question that was pre-submitted was, what are some strategies for successfully identifying, recruiting, and retaining volunteer board and committee members? Yeah, so this one is a tough nut to crack, but high level, some strategies to focus on. One is to make sure that you are recruiting volunteers from a diverse source. So get out of the typical lanes that we see, like the EDCs, and look for a variety of kind of different voices that really follow around these 4 points. And so we actually have a resource for that. And if you're interested in getting that resource, just reach out to us, or we'll include it in our webinar recap notes so that you can see the different types of voices that should be, potentially recruited to be volunteers. And the second part about recruiting is really to ask, personal relationships and giving a direct personal ask for someone to get involved is one of the most, successful ways of recruiting volunteers. And for retaining volunteers or board members, it's really, you really have to create job descriptions for your volunteers. Really give them, bite-sized, task-oriented things that they can wrap their head around, not an abstract involvement in volunteering with the organization, but saying, this is your role, this is what that means, can you do it? It's also an important thing to realize that, let's say you really want an accountant to join your board, and you find an accountant, but they don't want to do any accounting. They want to plant flowers. They're like, I do accounting during the day and I want to plant flowers for you guys. And like, that's okay. Like, you're going to have to match, what the volunteer interest is with what you need. And when you have those kind of volunteer job descriptions, people can find where they fit into the volunteer mix. All right, any other questions? Oh, I see another one here. What's the relationship between a chamber and a bid? So there doesn't have to be any relationship between a chamber and a bid. A chamber, again, I can be corrected in the chat here. A chamber is a 501c6 entity, I believe. And so they have their own charter. They are a membership-based organization. They can work in a much larger region. They are not defined to a geographic an area. So businesses that are within that bid district could belong to a chamber. That's one way that there's a relationship there. But in terms of kind of structurally or organizationally, there isn't a direct relationship unless there was, a strategic partnership that was made in place that the community decided on. I will actually say, no, there's one example I'll bring up. Middletown, their downtown program is a bid. And they also have a 501c3 status nonprofit that allows them to apply for grants in addition to the money they receive from the bid. And they partner with the chamber to do a lot of their events. So the Middletown's bid will give a contract to the chamber to do some of their big anchor events because the bid itself does not have the capacity to carry out those events, but the chamber does. So that is one example of how a relationship could look like. Okay. Oh, good. Happy that was clear. Any other questions? Oh, good. Glad that we were on the same wavelength, Rebecca, with the chamber there. Okay. Oh, and here's the CMDA website that we think that the A means authority. Thank you, Chris. There's the website right in there so you can learn more about that. Very good. Well, I'll do my closing out slides now, but if you have any other questions, we're here. So keep them coming. We invite you, if you're not already a member of Connecticut Main Street Center, to become a member. We are growing our membership and we represent all sorts of communities, all varying sizes, from urban to suburban and rural. And we are here to help you form your management structure, but then also help you implement best practices for your downtown. So if you're interested, please reach out to us. We are very excited to talk to you. We have a couple upcoming webinars. So last December, we had a deep presentation about their offerings that they have that can support downtowns. And now we're having a part 2 on August 7th, where they'll be talking about their sustainability and open space programs. You can register that on our website at ctmainstreet.org/events. Also in August, we are going to be having a webinar on EV charging. This is going to be a little bit more than a 101, a little bit of a 201 of what does it mean to have EV charging as it applies to your downtown district with one of our professional affiliates. So that will be happening on August 14th. And we are also gearing up to have our 3rd cohort of Main Street Accelerator. And so as we were talking about the path of forming a Main Street program, this program can be a really excellent step once you form that steering committee that's going to be driving the effort forward. So come join us on September 18th for the information session to learn more about the program and what it all means. You can sign up on our website as well. And then once again, thank you so much to our sponsors and our program partners. And when you exit this webinar, you will get an evaluation. So please fill that evaluation out, as it really helps us form our webinar content, especially as we just started our new fiscal year. So we are building out our webinar calendar for the year. So what's on your mind? We want to hear from you. I will hang on for just a little bit longer in case there are any other questions that come through. But thank you so much for joining us today. And we hope that we will talk to you soon about getting Main Street management set up in your community. Thank you, everyone.